Hello again, I am Blunty. This is the Gigabyte GeForce Did already. I did already. I went to say GTX instead of RTX. This is the RTX 2080 Gaming OC 8G. I knew I was going to do that sooner or later. Haven't we all, by this point already, just instinctively said GTX instead of RTX? Anyway, by now, those of you interested in the RTX series will have seen enough general reviews to have a pretty good idea about the performance kick that the 2080 offers up over what came before. But in short, as is the way of these generational upgrades, it's broadly similar to the GTX 1080 Ti from the previous generation. At least when it comes to general game performance. But it's not just faster, it also has more hardware and does things that the 10 series just cannot do. Like up to 8K H.265 video encoding, nice for those of us who make a lot of use of recorded gameplay. But of course there's also the headline feature, the ray tracing. The reason they call it the RTX and not GTX, the R is for ray tracing. Sadly, for right now, as I record this, no games have been patched to include that functionality, and even if they did, the Windows update that would have enabled the feature was withdrawn because it was so buggy it boned a bunch of users by deleting their personal files. Great work as usual, Microsoft, just great work. Hopefully by the time you're actually hearing these words, Microsoft will have fixed it, fingers crossed. Anyway, like I said, by now, if you're watching this, chances are you are already familiar with the basic game performance of these cards, so I'm not going to focus on that here. I'm not going to go through a bunch of benchmarks and tell you a bunch of frame rates and do comparisons to the cards that came before, except to say that this card delivers what I'd hoped for, which is bringing the majority of my games to a point where I can play at or significantly closer to 4K 60 frames per second without any sacrifices to graphics quality when compared to my existing 1080. So instead of a bunch of raw power comparisons, I'll be focusing on Gigabyte's particular flavour of the hardware. Right off the bat, I'm going to tell you it's a pretty chunky card, sucking up more than 2 PCIe slots worth of space. I think it's 2.3 or 2.7 or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter what the point is, it takes up more than 2. So if you're interested in using 2 cards in SLI arrangements, you may be better off going for the very slightly slower clocked Gigabyte Windforce variant of the 2080. It's basically the same hardware, the board is identical I believe, but the Windforce variant has a neat 2-slot cooler design that'll make your life much easier for SLI. But back on the gaming OC here, the cooler design is nice. It's angular, mostly subtle at least compared to some alternatives, and I especially appreciate the monochromatic choice, so it'll fit into any colour scheme you happen to be building. The backplate is similarly Spartan, with just a few angular design nods. There's a light up logo, which is RGB addressable of course. Aside from that, nothing really flashy at all. I quite like it really. It's restrained, but still looking gamery. On the backplate, you'll find all the standard connections for an RTX 2080, a HDMI port, 3 display ports, and new to this generation, a USB Type-C port which supports the new Unified Virtual Link VR standard. Not currently in use by any commercial hardware, but when they do come, it'll be a really nice one-cable solution for your VR. But it's the fans that are my favourite part. The chunky thermal mass of the heatsinks combined with Gigabyte's well-established fan blade design, which is the same as on previous models, means this card is remarkably quiet.
Reference. This is me about 50 centimeters away from the microphone with the card running at 60%, and I can easily whisper over it. And this is the card running at 70%. This is as loud as it ever got, even under heavy overclocks and under benchmark conditions. And as you can tell, I can still whisper over it incredibly easily.
And that cooling continues its delights when it comes to overclocking. a comparatively conservative OC out of the box, I had room enough to push the core clock another 150 MHz and the memory kicked up another 700 MHz. This overclock, which rather impressively didn't add any extra fan noise at all, and I'm deadly serious about this, no extra fan noise at all, I'll show you in a second what happens to the temps, but it brought actual gaming in Far Cry 5 up just a bit. Nothing really significant at 1080 or 1440p where the CPU is probably the choke point, but at 4K ultra settings it's enough to bring the average FPS up to just over 60 frames per second. And isn't that the magic number we all target? Again, the boost isn't really groundbreaking, but it's nice all the same. It is free performance after all. The maxed out Shadow of the Tomb Raider canned benchmark at 1080, 1440p and 4K tells us much the same story. A little kick, but nothing that'll blow your head backwards. The Time Spy Extreme benchmark kicked up almost 300 extra points, and out of the box or manual overclock, neither one could cook the card up past 68 degrees. This is what I'm talking about. The overclock still wouldn't push the temperatures any further past what it was already doing out of the box, so the fans were exactly the same noise levels. And of course 68 degrees is a long way under thermal throttle down, so you're still getting rock solid performance. The standard Time Spy test soaks up 500 extra points for the manual OC, and it's the same story with the temperatures, of course. So I guess the take-home message I can tell you about my time with the Gigabyte Gaming OC flavour of the RTX 2080 is simple. It's fantastic. Flexible, monotone colour scheme wraps around a cooler design that isn't too aggressive and nutty, but it is built and executed superbly so the thing stays socks on carpet quiet the entire time, regardless of whether you've manually overclocked it and pushing it to its limits. And more importantly, the 2080 in general is enough, as I said, to push my 4K gaming experience to the performance levels I chased but never saw with my 1080. The 2080 is a solid choice for some high-end gaming, and Gigabyte's variant here is exactly what you'd hope from Gigabyte. Only this time they've abandoned that weird orange they spliced around in the last generation in favour of some more classy greys. It was a rough day when I had to send the review sample back, I'm just saying that. So thanks for watching, I am Blunty, and I'll catch you next time.